Oh no, what happened to my? Are y'all kidding me? Here it is. Okay, what we're gonna try to do today is see if YouTube is cooperating with me. So let's give it a minute. Let me turn the screen. Nope. Okay, let me come back. Reverse the camera. Let's try this again. And let's see if we can do it now. Nope. Okay. It's not happening today. Got it. All right. I'm going to slide on out the way then. So at a minimum, we'll turn the phone slightly. Okay. Good morning. We're going to go ahead and get our deep breathing started today. I'm going to count us down. The purpose of this is, again, as always, to regulate the emotion center, the limbic system, just to calm it down. Also to give notification to the prefrontal cortex that we are getting ready to use it today. I'm going to count you down, and we're going to take 3 inhales and exhales. We'll inhale and exhale. 3 deep breaths to get the party started. So on 3, 2, 1. Okay. And good morning to you, Lola. All right, let's get this back. Now let me go into Gmail. Our topic today is we're doing one of the 74 principles of world leadership, and today's topic is exercise tact. Now the quote that I have in my book, World Leaders Wear Pink, is tact is like a dessert fork, present but used sparingly. And I used the story in my book when I was in high school, ROTC. My sergeant, or the leader that was in charge, Sergeant Morgenstern, was in charge of ROTC. He called me in his office and he told me, what did I know what the definition of tact was? I said, no. He said, well, go home and look it up. So back then we had to go home, get a dictionary, look it up. I looked it up, and I said, yeah. So you need to use tact when yelling at the cadets. And he said, no, you don't use tact when you are speaking to the cadets. And so he demoted me and took my stripes and put me back in the same squad to teach me a very valuable lesson. And so since then, I have been learning how to use tact, and I am good at tact now, unless I don't need to exercise tact in the event that somebody wants to try to pop off and see, then I can become very tactless and very petty because I'm very competitive and I want to win that tongue battle, if you will. However, most of the time, I am extremely tactful, and so we are addressing tact today because we need to understand why it's necessary from a leadership perspective. And so exercising tact is basically the ability to communicate or act in a sensitive, considerate, and socially appropriate way. And it requires a coordinated effort between several brain regions so that you can handle emotional regulation, empathy, perspective taking, impulse control, and social decision making. And so basically what that means is that you are not going to allow people to hijack your amygdala. You are also going to take in the factually based information of the situation that's taking place. And be objective is one of the 74 principles of real leadership. You're going to use in your executive function, inhibition control. So you're going to have impulse control. You're not going to let that right amygdala pop off and then the left amygdala say, yeah, and take that. And then also, you're going to make decisions based upon the environment in which the situation is taking place. Now, in short, tact isn't being nice, because unaccountable people will have you believe that in order for you to have tact, you need to be nice. No, okay, that's not what's happening. It's actually the brain's running real-time simulation of what you might say and checking against the emotional, social, and contextual filters, choosing the response that aligns best with empathy and appropriateness. So you're not just going to just say, oh, I have to be nice in this situation. No, sometimes you need to be disciplined. Sometimes you need to assess the situation. For example, my child has only popped off one time as the only child who was semi-spoiled in a store in her life, and it was Target. And it's the only time that I left that basket and I took her and we left. And that's the only time that that has ever occurred. So the tactful thing for me to do in that moment was to remove the recalcitrant toddler that was acting a fool and take her out of that situation. Socially, that behavior is unacceptable, and she wanted to find out what would happen if she popped off. And now she knows and knew then that's not a good idea. We never, ever, 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 never had that situation take place again. So tact is not about being nice. Let me be clear. It is about assessing the situation and what is the appropriate response for what is taking place. That is what tact is all about. Now, there are people who avoid tact at all costs. You can look at it on any reality television show. You can see it taking place online and social media and everywhere else. In today's world, people do not have tact, and they have not been taught it. I know it's not being taught in schools now because of how people speak and the things that they say. The young people who say things on Instagram, we have disinhibition effect. So the last thing that people are using is tact. So what happens when people avoid tact, or why? When people avoid exercising tact, they speak or act without sensitivity to others. The brain shifts activity patterns in a way that reduces social regulation and increases reactivity. And this often means overactivation in emotional and threat detection centers and underactivation of higher order control and empathy networks. So, what does that mean? People with tact lacked neuroplasticity. They do not have enough neural pathways to assess the situation. So they are neurologically inept to into or enact tactful actions. They do not have the pathways to do it because they did not create them. You are not born with a tact neural pathway that you just automatically use. It is not instinctive. And because we have almost 6 billion adults in the world using their hijacked amygdalas and their deregulated emotional centers to run their entire life, the last thing they're doing in a situation is saying, oh, wait, hey, prefrontal cortex, let's assess what's taking place. What is the most appropriate thing to say in this moment? And use empathy and understanding. And it's not being a doormat. It's not letting people walk all over you, but it's saying be a thermostat, not a thermometer. That's what real leaders do to make this situation end, to handle conflict when it occurs, which is one of the 74 principles of real leadership. What is the best course of action in this situation? And I know on lives that I have said that people have said and done things to me recently where I use the most tactful response in that situation. And it's not, oh, Dr. Donna didn't curse and she didn't say anything, but diffusing the situation so that the situation can end. So tact is not always pretty. Okay, sometimes you get read like a nursery rhyme, and that's still being tactful because I know that I could literally obliterate somebody with a tongue lashing that they would not be able to recover from even after having grandchildren. So I have the ability to go hamburger on people, and I'm choosing the higher road to do that. I also have the ability to say, what's the best course of action? Even on lives, remove the person, that's the most tactful thing to do. Ask the person to stop, that's another tactful thing to do. In person, walk away. I'm finished having this conversation. Let's handle this one. We're in a different environment. So I have the ability, 50 shades of tact. So even on lives, when it appears like, oh my goodness, she said that, what is the best course of action to keep this learning environment where it is? So here's what happens with the avoidance of tact. Avoiding tact means that there is emotional and acceleration happening where? In the amygdala. And it's pressing harder to say, nope, I'm not going to do anything. It's all gas, no brakes. And it's happening in the prefrontal cortex, the orbital frontal cortex, the ACC, and the temporal parietal junction. They aren't fully engaged. So this imbalance makes communication more impulsive and blunt and potentially damaging to relationships. So because of emotional deregulations, People don't have tact, therefore they can't exercise it because that neural pathway doesn't exist. And this is why you have family arguments at barbecues and cookouts and everything else. This is why you have instances of schools having things happen between students in relationships, because people don't know how to communicate effectively, which is one of the 74 principles of real leadership, and they don't have the tact neural pathway to handle situations in a emotionally regulated pattern. So this is what happens again. People are using their amygdalas to run their life, and now they're saying and doing everything. And the more you interact with them negatively, it just fuels it back and forth. So if you have two hijacked amygdala people interacting online, next thing you know, it then turned into this big old whole thing. They've had people, I've read that people are playing games with people, and the next thing you know, somebody is showing up at that person's house because of a video game that they were playing online, because of the inability to have tact. And you need to have tact so that your prefrontal cortex is in charge, because that's where the inhibition control resides in the executive function of your brain. So what questions do you have about tact and why people avoid it? Because what I'm going to address more today is the benefits of it, the real leadership aspect, and exercises for you to use to have it, because we know people don't have it. So I don't have to belabor over the fact that they don't have it. You can go, but pretty much can't go a day without seeing it not being done. Anything, just scroll on social media, turn the news on, listen to people, watch people. People don't have tact. They do not have it, and it hasn't been wired, and it is because of a strong, deregulated emotional center. So the limbic system is running the show instead of the prefrontal cortex. Yes, Nola, you do. Yes, ma'am. And Lola, I see that you have an ellipse there, so I will wait for your question. And I'm actually today doing just Dr. Donna Thomas-Rodgers' perspective of it, because it's just that important. Good morning, Mr. Hook. That we need the real leader perspective, not the neurological. And there will be some neuroscience, because y'all know everything I do is based in neuroscience now, but it will not be this whole, and these are the regions. So I will be saying those regions, but from a real leader perspective. And I had that prepared to do. And when I looked back at it, because I prepared this live a couple days ago, I looked back at it yesterday and I was like, I don't want to take that approach. I need to take a more humanistic approach, because we are on the receiving end of a lot of people's tactless interactions, because it isn't there. And it just the amygdala guardrails are off when it comes to tact. So what happens is, just like with lying, if you get away with doing something that was tactless and the amygdala doesn't stop you, then you just keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. And the next thing you know, you're in leadership positions. Good morning, Jessica. And you're being tactless around everybody, and it's suck it up and drive on, and you too soft, and all these other things to make it seem like it's something wrong with you, instead of people being, and it's not politically correct. Politically correct is tiptoeing around shit that needs to be said. So let me make that clear as well. I am not saying be politically correct. That's the term the unaccountables came up with, so don't nobody feelings get hurt. Are you saying task mean to suppress the amygdala and use your prefrontal cortex? Tact, T-A-C-T, tact, T-A-C-T. And so it is used as a way to communicate effectively inside of situations. And so what happens is, when you don't use tact, T-A-C-T, what happens is the amygdala reads the situation wrong, and people end up saying and do things that will result in a bad outcome. That's what I'm saying. So, for example, when there are people on the live and they're saying inappropriate things, and I'm remaining calm and I'm saying that's not true, don't say that, this is disrespectful, I am actually using tact, T-A-C-T, in that moment. Now, sometimes the comedian in me shows up, and then I just go ham on them because they're hecklers. And so I'm removing myself from the scene. But when people say things that are wrong and I stop to educate them before I block them, that is me using tact first. So I'm giving them an opportunity to learn how to use their brain. And if they continue with their rhetoric, then at that point they need to be removed. So that whole scenario, when it takes place, and notice that school has started back, as I mentioned, and football has started back in America, we have less trolls on the live. So you saw that when people are bored, the idle mind is the amygdala's workshop. We had an influx of trolls and unaccountable people. And now they're few and far between because they either are parents and their kids went back to school, or they had to go back to school and now they have something else to do because sports are starting back in America. So as anytime someone is basically in high emotional situations, it's so good to have a tactical approach. Exactly. Like walking away. Or if you can't walk away from the situation, you don't allow your amygdala to be hijacked. So when Mark at Frito-Lay was on coke and he had a fight with Francesca and then tried to hit me with the warehouse door and call me a black bitch, he's still here. So I used tact in that situation to get him and Francesca out and then calm the workplace back down so we could finish, because it was in the middle of the shift. So we still had half the workload to get done. So there was no way that I was going to be able to pop off with 92 routes, and we were halfway through. So 41 routes have been picked. We still needed to finish the rest of the shift. So that's what it's like. Okay. So Dr. Donna's perspective. So for the rest of the live, we're going to be talking about Dr. Donna's perspective on exercise and tact, real leadership, and the neuroscience-ness of it all, so that you bring it together so that it makes sense to you and to your brain. And chat just refers to me as Dr. Donna Thomas-Rodgers, so that's what I'm going to do. Dr. Donna Thomas-Rodgers' real leader's perspective on exercise and tact centers on the principle of real leadership, and it requires balancing truth with respect. Balancing truth with respect. So we know one of the 74 principles of real leadership is to treat people with dignity and respect. And so additionally, you're using the brain's executive power, the executive function, to ensure that communication builds rather than breaks trust. So you want to use this as a trust building platform. So here are the structured breakdowns of her perspective, grounded in real leadership philosophies and neuroscience alignment. So I'm getting ready to tell you what the core principle is and how this is aligned with real leadership as well as neuroscience. So respectful honesty. Respectful honesty. What is that? A real leader delivers truth with precision and empathy, never sacrificing clarity for comfort, but also never weaponizing words. So in this instance, Nola and I just had an interaction where she was not using tact. And so I had to explain to her how to behave in that situation and the better way to use it. And I didn't say, you simple motherfucker, you dumbass, you did it. That's not what took place. So what took place was we had the conversation. I explained to her what was happening neurologically and how that situation needed to be taken care of. And so she's getting ready. She's coming around third on her third 365-day challenge. And she's going to go from that to self-care challenge that was custom designed for her. She's going to go into the listening challenge, but she's about 8 days away. So she's been saying, when I go to the listening challenge, and I'm saying, you know how many times more times you're going to speak to me in 8 days. You got to start creating that neural pathway right now. So it was respectful honesty. And the neuroscience link to this is that it's the prefrontal cortex and the temporal parietal junction. And that temporal parietal junction is where the temporal lobe and the parietal lobe actually meet. So we got over here in this area in here. So if y'all can see this green and this, so this is the temporal lobe, this is the parietal lobe. So that junction is where that is. And so you evaluate the impact and you maintain perspective taking. And so in that instance, I'm being honest. I'm still being respectful. I'm not weaponizing words, but I am saying you got 8 days left. No more. Start letting those neurons wire and fire now, so that when you start the challenge, you're already prepped and primed. So that synaptic, because it takes 8 days to create a synaptic connection. You can all thank Kevin for that, a neural pathway for the 40 days that he did it. So she has 8 days. So focusing on this for 8 days, when the 30-day challenge starts, she already has that neural pathway, and those 30 days, she will just be strengthening it. So I was respectful to her, but I was also honest and said, yeah, we're not waiting 8 days. Next is emotional regulation. And so real leaders must master self-control in high pressure or emotionally charged situations, speaking only after the emotional charge is neutralized. So in this instance, the amygdala is heightened and the prefrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex need to be engaged. So as she was speaking loudly in a tone and using words aggressively towards me, first of all, we have an ant issue in the house because of where my bathroom is placed. So I was saying I got to get on chat because what we're using is not working. So we're going to have to use stronger methods. She's asking me this question very aggressively. And now I'm trying to do my nasal rinse and there's a timeline because a live is happening. So that was an emotionally heightened situation. And so I had to calm down, finish the nasal rinse, get rid of the ants, start looking at it up on chat so we can take action after the live and then address what was taking place for her. So I had a emotionally regulated response to the situation because I'm like, damn it, Donna, these ants, I got bit by ants. Because I actually got bit by a bunch of ants when I was at advanced camp and mosquitoes had 150 bites and had to get medevac to the hospital. So for me, that was a trigger because I see these ants and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm back at advanced camp again at Fort Lewis. All of that was taking place and I had about 15 minutes to get on the live. So I exercised tact in that moment and took care of her, had to have a quick coaching session with her, take my measuring cup back downstairs to the kitchen, still finish understanding what we need to do for the ants, and then get back on live. And none of you were aware of that because that was a heightened situation. But because I had tact and I had emotional regulation, I'm just here this morning having the live. Next is relationship preservation. So the goal of tact is not to just be nice, but to maintain trust and collaboration while still addressing necessary truths. So it was not for me to be nice and say, sweetie, now when you're talking to Dr. Donna that's not a way to speak to me. 1, 2, 3, all eyes on me. No, that's not what's happening. I am maintaining trust, but I am still saying you need to start working on your listening and communication today, right now, in this moment. And the brain regions that are being used is the orbital frontal cortex, and it helps adopt communication and maintain social bonds. So I maintained her self-esteem, treating her with dignity and respect. But I'm also saying I'm communicating with you so that we will still have a trusting relationship. I'm preserving a relationship, but I'm still saying you got to start learning how to listen now. Next is the accountability in communications. So being tactful doesn't mean avoiding hard conversations. So the answer there, I'm trying to do a nasal rinse. I got to get on the live. I'm making sure the ants don't bite me. And it's like 1 or 2. It's not this infestation, but 1 ant in our house is 17 too many for me. So it means owning your delivery and ensuring your words align with values and intended outcomes. So my intended outcome is for my child to be an effective communicator and be an effective listener. And so in that moment, I'm holding her accountable tactfully to say, today's the day. It's time. We don't have 8 days to wait. Now, what happens is the hippocampus recalls relevant experiences to guide present day communication choices. Because I have had to deal with difficult soldiers, truck drivers, warehouse workers, distribution center workers, my whole immediate family, in that moment, I got enough history, enough experiences to say, all right, calm down, doc. You have to handle this situation and be calm because you need to get on live and talk about tact. So I took all of that into consideration in probably nanoseconds, maybe 10 seconds or less. Boom, 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 boom. This is the best way to have this conversation. And in the military, we call that an on-the-spot correction. So I can't wait till after the live and then say, remember 2 hours ago when you did this, or hour and a half ago when you did this, because it has to be happening in the moment. So now the hippocampus, the prefrontal cortex, the orbital frontal cortex can all come together and say, okay, that I need to change that, so that the neurons can start firing and wiring and connecting those synaptic connections so we can start creating that listening neural pathway. So it is accountability, being tactful, but I'm still holding her accountable because the outcome is for her to be a better listener and to communicate effectively. And then finally, modeling professionalism. So a real leader sets the tone for how challenges and feedback are communicating, modeling restraint and empathy for the people that they lead. So that is what's happening, is I'm a thermostat, not a thermometer. So even if she was not understanding and saying that's not what I'm doing, and then understanding what was taking place, my objective is to be cool as the other side of the pillow and say, this is what was happening. Let me give you an example. And now, even with that, having her re-say it in a better way stops the bad habit, and then starts the good habit. So the basal ganglia was notified. We don't say that, we say it this way. And as she was adjusting her tone and she got to the right conversational tone, I said, that's the tone that you need to be doing, that you need to be using. And instead of asking accusatory questions in a very aggressive way, here's how that actually needs to take place. And so I believe it was a very effective, a very effective coaching session. She can chime in to let you all know and if I'm correct or not. So you're using the superior temporal sulcus and the insula to process social and emotional cues to shape the delivery. Now, I recognize that my child has 3 mental illnesses, and so I am managing ADD, ADHD, and autism at the same time while I'm speaking to her. So seeing which one is up and present, and not like, oh my God, this is domestic violence, but to say, how do I communicate to get to and through all of those so that she can hear what I'm saying and actually adjust the behavior. So what questions do you have about my perspective from a real leadership perspective based in neuroscience of what has to happen when you are balancing tact with trust and respect? So you're using respectful honesty, emotional regulation, relationship preservation, accountability and communications, and then modeling professionalism. And if it's clear, I can move on. Here is one of the quotes from Dr. Donna for Exercise and Tact. A real leader's words are measured not only by their truth, but by their ability to preserve respect, inspire change, and strengthen connections. Tact is not a weakness, it is a strategic strength. So it's not a weakness. It's not you being nice. That's not what's happening. I'm going to just steamroll all over Dr. Donna. No, you're not. No, you're not. Because you have to have discipline. You literally need to be in your prefrontal cortex in order for tact to work effectively. Okay, next. According to Dr. Donna Thomas-Rodgers, what are some real leader activities based in neuroscience to strengthen exercise and tact? That's what I asked Chat. Here's what Chat told me. Based on Dr. Donna Thomas-Rodgers' real leader principles and a neuroscience framework, strengthening the ability to exercise tact requires deliberate brain training. So I said that you have to be deliberate about training your brain if you're going to be using tact, because it's in the areas that govern emotional regulation, perspective taking, and social judgment. So you're going to have to calm the limbic system down. And then in the prefrontal cortex, you're going to be using that as well as the parietal lobes in order to have perspective and understand social judgment. And you don't have to be out socializing in order for it to be a social situation. The interaction that I just had with my child is a social situation. So it's not like, oh, I'm on a social media, I'm at a party. It's anytime you are engaging in contact with another human being. Okay, so here is a structured list of real leader activities rooted in neuroscience that she would align with, she being me. So the activity is pause, reflect, and respond practice. So that's 3 to 5 seconds before replying. So while I'm watching these 2 ants crawl, little tiny ants, I'm doing my nasal rinse in my other sink. They're over in my first sink instead of my second sink. So I'm over here looking, and she's saying what she's saying to me. And I'm thinking about, okay, I got bit by a bunch of ants and had to get eyes swole up, need a Benadryl and everything else. I'm not saying anything. I'm just observing. And so what this does is it builds impulse control and allows the brain's social breaks to engage. So it's, okay, hold up. I see what's happening. I'm notifying the inhibition control center in my executive function. Chill out for a second. We're not going to respond. Now, we're not going to react. We're going to respond. And so from a neuroscience basis, this activates the prefrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex to override amygdala-driven impulses. So the first thing I wanted to do was hurry up and get rid of those ants. Next, I'm like, but you need to do your nasal rinse so you can breathe. Additionally, I wanted to tell her, shut up. I got ants going on. I got to do this. I got to do the live. So if I hadn't did any of that, then there isn't this calm demeanor that you all are experiencing right now. So I took that time out to say, okay, how will I respond to all of this shit that's taking place right now? And so I chose to take a break for a second, let the prefrontal cortex take over, and still turn that into a coaching session. Found out what I needed on chat, already got the plan. As soon as we get off the live, we're going to start going assessing things. go to the store, get some sealant, some borax, and all that, and take care of it. But if I had popped off and had emotional deregulation, who knows what would have took place. Next is empathy mapping. So daily 5 to 10 minute reflection on how others might perceive your words. Coming from Detroit, coming from the hood, others used to perceive my words differently. And at Frito-Lay, we learned this concept, intent versus impact. So how you intended something to happen may not be the impact that it had. Now, sometimes I'm intending for it to have an impact, and I'm well aware of that. But in general, that's why I recommend reading 15 minutes or more of nonfiction a day to improve your personal lexicon, which is your personal vocabulary, because word choice matters. There, even from a negative perspective to a positive perspective, choosing, as Kevin said the other day, man, getting up at 5 o'clock, working out, being at the gym is brutal. And I said, reframe that and say, I'm working towards a healthier existence. And now the brain says, okay, cool. I like that. So you have to be able to take that situation and your words. And reframe the words, because what it does is it enhances perspective taking and emotional awareness. I know my child has 3 mental illnesses popping off at the wrong time. There are times when I pop off because I'm like, I don't give a fuck about none of that. You about to do this right here. But in that moment, I understood that that's not what she was attempting to do. But because she hasn't been in the listening challenge and doesn't have her tact neural pathway or her listening neural pathway completely built, I understood that. And so I'm being aware of what's taking place. And so what this action does in having empathy is it strengthens your temporal parietal junction up in here. And it also activates insular connectivity. So next you will do role reversal conversations. So practice delivering feedback from another perspective. So I'm always saying, let me assess the situation from the other person's perspective, because I have my perspective, but let me have their perspective. And it improves your flexibility and communication styles. NOLA has a very diverse clientele base. I mean, people are from all, I would say, every continent, and everybody has moved here to Las Vegas. And so we have people from different socioeconomic status, different ethnicities, different religious preferences, and all of those things. Like I said, we have a big Hasidic Jew population in our neighborhood. And so she has different Orthodox Jews and Hasidic Jews as clients. And so there are certain things that you got to do, certain days you can't have appointments and all of that. So you have to be able to understand from their perspective, because you want to have tact when interacting with them. Treat people with dignity and respect, and embrace diversity. And again, this improves your flexibility and communication style. So there are some houses that it will be hot year round. No matter what the temperature is outside, they may barely have the air conditioner on. So now we got to make adjustments for that. We can be like, damn, it's so motherfucking hot in here. This shit don't make no sense. No, this is the temperature of their house. And so we make adjustments, and we're being tactful in that process. Now, what this does is it boosts the orbitofrontal cortex and the superior temporal sulcus by processing social cues. So because you are assessing the situation in someone else's business or home, it allows you to say, okay, this is their perspective. And so when you have the neural pathways, when you are not regulated by your emotion, but your prefrontal cortex is strong, you actually have the ability to assess the situation. You have the neural capability. Okay, so it's not, you 70 years old, you 55 years old, how come your dumb ass don't know how? Because remember, you have to have the neural pathway in order to demonstrate that behavior. You have to have that connectivity, or it's not going to happen. So instead of saying your dumb ass, no, you have not created the neural pathways to have tact. You have not created the neural pathways of empathy. You have not created the neural pathways to strengthen your prefrontal cortex and regulate your emotional center. And so that is why it's impossible for people who haven't actually done the actual work. And that's why you have to strengthen your prefrontal cortex. And then I'd like to just make a side note of this, is that yesterday, I think that we're just in a curtain hanging growth character building phase. And so yesterday we had to hang a curtain above an arc window over a television with no center beam for support. And we had to do it in like 30 minutes because it's an Airbnb and the people were getting ready to show up. So it was a very tight window. If you saw this on a reality TV show, you'd be like, that couldn't possibly be real. And what I told Nola when it was all over is I said, challenge yourself is one of the 74 principles of real leadership. But here's the thing. when you challenge yourself, as we learned about 10 days ago, or maybe 2 weeks ago, the hippocampus gives you new neurons because you need to learn how to do something. And so you need some new neurons to create those new pathways. And every time we have a challenging appointment, I remind her of that. You just created, the hippocampus rewarded you with new neurons for new neuroplasticity. So when people can't get to the next level of having tact or solve problems, is because they didn't challenge themselves. So the hippocampus didn't give them new neurons to be able to handle those challenges. And that's why you don't let this comfort seeking son of a gun right here run things, because it's never going to let you challenge yourself. It's never going to say, yeah, go ahead, leave your comfort zone, go ahead and take that risk. It happens here. And that's why I can handle so much, is because of how many challenges I've had to endure in my life. But that's how many times the hippocampus rewarded me with new neurons to handle those challenges. So yes, being tactful is a challenge, but the hippocampus, which is located in the limbic system, is going to release new neurons, because you got to learn how to do that. And now you're going to have these new synaptic connections. So yeah, you want to have empathy, and that means you're going to have to be in situations where you need to have empathy in order to create that neural pathway. You're going to be in situations where you want to slap the shit out of somebody and you don't, and you use tact. So now you have the new neurons to make that synaptic connection and create that new neural pathway. Next is mindful listening drills. Mindful listening drills. So you're going to focus fully on the other person's words and nonverbal cues. You're actually going to listen to the person, not because it's about to be a debate, not because you're going to prove them wrong, but because you're actually going to wait and listen and see what they said and the nonverbals. And I've said this before, nonverbal communication is 91% of all communication. That's why I can go, and you know exactly what I just said. And so what this does is this increases sensitivity to context and tone before speaking. That is what Nola is getting ready to start working on, because she can't hear her own tone and her own context before speaking. So as a result, it comes across abrasive and aggressive and brash when that's not even her intent. But she has to get to challenge herself so the hippocampus can give her the new neurons. So now she can create the synaptic connections and strengthen that listening neural pathway. And what this does is this activates the superior temporal sulcus for nonverbal decoding and the insula for emotional resonance. So if you see somebody go, you automatically know. And Kevin has done it and been like, what's going on? Why is Dr. Donna doing the ugly cry? Because of the sensitivity and the empathy for understanding what is taking place. Next is story reframing exercises. And so you're going to reword blunt statements and turn it into constructive feedback. And I say performance focused feedback. And so what this does is it trains the language filtering for positive impact. So you don't say, you simple motherfucker, what the fuck is wrong with your dumbass? You say, you know what? I understand that this is a learning challenge for you, but let's work together for a solution that will be beneficial to everybody. Same thing, just worded differently. And it's not that corporate speak. That's not some bullshit, because now the brain is saying, oh, okay, I got an opportunity for growth. Good morning, Sean. I have an opportunity for growth. So that's how you're reframing it so that the person will want to do it. Because if you say, you simple motherfucker, what the fuck is wrong with you? Now the amygdala gets hijacked and fight, flight, freeze, or appease. And now the situation has gone completely left. And that's not what you want to take place. So you want to keep this, diffuse the situation, be a thermostat, not a thermometer, and keep everybody in the prefrontal cortex. So now the person, the hippocampus gets notified, says, oh, we gotta learn how to do something new. Okay, yeah, I'm checking my long-term memory. Nope, you don't have that skill. Here you go. You're gonna need about 15,000 neurons for that situation. Bam. And now you go to the bank of the hippocampus to get you some new neurons. And what this also does is it engages the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex for verbal control and the hippocampus for context recall, what I just said. And last night I was talking to Nola about this. And so here's the thing. This is what people are trying to do. People want to stay in the limbic system and do nothing and be comfortable. And then what they want to do is they want new shit. And so what happens is, in order, they say, oh, I'm going to go get a new job. I'm going to go and start a business. But they don't have the neural pathways to get it done. So instead of challenging themselves to get it done themselves, to create those new neurons, they start going to hire other people. They start finagling it. They start lying, and then they start entering into falsity and bargains And when those false, and that's basically making a deal with the devil. When those Faustian bargains go left, now they want to start complaining. So when Nola was 4 years old, one time she said she wanted something, and I was playing with her. I said, "Sweetie, we don't have any money for that." And she said, "No, just get your card out your purse and go to the bank and get some money." And so we had a financial conversation after that. No, there has to be money in the bank in order for this card to go into the machine and for money to come out. And that's what the hippocampus is. So people have insufficient funds in their hippocampus and they want to keep spending. And so they're working on neural credit. And that's why they're going to get other people to do things for them, but they don't actually have the money. So in order for you to actually have real confidence, in order for you to build new neural pathways, the deposit or the work in order for you to withdraw some neurons is you have to challenge yourself. So no new challenge, no new funds. So no new neurons. So the bank of hippocampus is only letting you make withdrawals if you are challenging yourself. If you're doing the same old, the hippocampus is like, I already gave you some neurons for that. You know how to do that. Oh, if you want to learn how to communicate effectively, I got neurons for you. But if you want to keep popping off and cussing people out, you already know how to do that. I'm not about to give you no neurons for that. Denied. Get the hell out of here. Challenging yourself is how you make withdrawals from the hippocampus. So if you think of it as the bank of hippocampus, if you want to learn how to do something, you're going to have to go to a higher level. You are not going to keep going to the bank of hippocampus and making withdrawals on dumb shit because there will be no new neurons for you. It was going to tell you no. That's how that goes. So hopefully that makes better sense to you. So now you can say, oh, I'm going to challenge myself, because that's the other thing that happens. You get ready to challenge yourself and then amygdala say, you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to do that. But if you just have a conversation with the hippocampus and say, I'm ready to do this. Okay, bet. I'm going to send you 30,000 neurons for you to be able to complete that next challenge. So that's how you do it. So override, but you can only have that conversation if you're in the prefrontal cortex. Because if the challenge comes and you start being afraid, the hippocampus it's only going to send fearful memories to the amygdala, and you're never, ever going to be able to accept that new challenge. So if you've ever found yourself trying to do something difficult and you can't, it's because you're trying to do it from the amygdala instead of from the prefrontal cortex. So you got to go to the prefrontal cortex and come back in and say, hey, hippocampus, my bad. I'm going to need some neurons because I'm about to go learn how to read books again, or I'm going to learn how to read. I'm about to start a business. I'm about to stop yelling at people, and I need some Tact neurons, okay? So I can go ahead and create this neural pathway. Next is, and that's just a side note. Okay, so controlled exposure to high stakes conversation. And you can actually have it simulated or be real. So we just had a high stakes conversation. And what it's going to do is strengthen your calmness under social pressure. So you're going to remain calm. We had to remain calm yesterday because the curtain rod wasn't going the way we needed it, and time was ticking, but we needed to have tact. We couldn't argue with each other because that was not going to work. And then every time that has happened, it's taken longer to get anything done because now the amygdalas are trying to win. So what this controlled exposure to high stakes conversation does is it improves your prefrontal cortex amygdala regulation loop for emotional control. And next is the daily social feedback journaling and writing. So track moments where you had tact that was used and tact that you didn't use. And when you do this, you're going to be able to assess when you are using tact, when you're not. And that's going to allow you to see, okay, if I'm in the grocery store and it's crowded, I'm not using tact. So I need to change the time that I go to the grocery store, or I need to ask the hippocampus for some neurons to create that tactful synaptic connection neural pathway. And what this does is it reinforces self-awareness and your adaptive behavior. You're going to need cognitive flexibility, again, located in the executive function of the brain, because you have to inhibit this amygdala from popping off. And so what this does is it boosts the ACC monitoring and it strengthens neuroplasticity in social regulation circuits. So what questions do you have about the activities? You're going to pause and reflect for 3 to 5 seconds. You're going to do some empathy mapping, role reversal in the conversation so you can see it from the other person's perspective, mindful listening drills. I'm going to pay attention to you. I'm going to look at all your gestures, and that's going to be it. Reframing the story so that you don't pop off. Controlled exposure. So when you're in a high stakes situation, now you're saying, okay, now it's time for me to use my tact. And then daily social journaling feedback. And so that means when did I use tact? See, I popped off at the grocery store, but I didn't when we had that person that cut us off in traffic. And so now you're monitoring when it's working, when it's not working. Okay, and the Dr. Donna quote is this: tact is a muscle, and leaders strengthen it by practicing constant conscious communication until it becomes their natural default. So you practice tact. It's not something that's just going to happen. You literally have to strengthen it and practice it throughout the day. If you don't get along with your in laws, when I was married, I used to call them my outlaws. I used to call them my outlaws, and so I needed to practice tact when I went to Mississippi. Yeah, that part. So I'm sure if you have a 15-year-old, you can work, because it ain't. I've never met somebody with a 15-year-old like, look at my little heartbeat over there. I'm so proud. Look at them. And I said this. I was doing Magic, which is the big retail for clothing convention here in Las Vegas, and we were doing work with South Africa, and two women from South Africa came, and we all had 15-year-olds, and they lived in two different parts as well. It wasn't like they were neighbors or anything, and we were all just like, 15. If we could just make it to 16. So a lot of tact during those years. Okay, so does anyone else, are we clear? Nola said no questions. Does anyone else, are we all clear? So I can talk about the benefits, and then we can do the brain bit and get on out of here. Okay, you're getting ready for, the kids ready for school, if I'm not mistaken, Jessica. Okay, so what are the benefits? According to Dr. Thomas-Rodgers, the Real Leader Framework for Exercising Tact produces measurable brain benefits that enhance a leader's ability to communicate effectively, which is one of the 74 principles of real leadership, regulate your emotions, and maintain strong relationships. And so that's the whole goal, is that you're using tact to maintain strong, honest, trustworthy relationships, but it needs to be there, because if you're constantly arguing with somebody, you're never going to get it resolved. When you use tact, you'll be able to handle conflict when it occurs and eliminate whatever the conflictual situation is. When you don't use tact, you're going to keep having the same damn argument over and over and over again. Same situation is going to keep popping off, because one thing about the amygdalas, the right one is popping off and the left one is ruminating with no solution. It's not going to give you a solution at all. It's just going to be like, yeah, we hate them motherfuckers. Can't stand their asses. It's on site. Then it's on site. All you do is argue again. Nothing ever happens. You keep doing it again and again and again. So here are the brain benefits. And some of it will sound similar to the exercises, because it's all a cohesive loop in order for you to start the neural pathway for tact, and then continue to strengthen it. And what I would like to say is that in exercising tact, there are thousands of neuron connections in order for you to do it, because you have to listen, you have to have empathy, you are assessing what's taking place, you're listening. So the orthographic processing center and occipital lobe back here, a lot of things are taking place in order for you to have that tactful situation. So that's why when I said the hippocampus is sending you 10,000, 20,000 neurons, it's because you need those individual synaptic connections to create those neural pathways. Like I said, all that's taking place for me to just do this right now is thousands and thousands and thousands of synaptic connections and neurons. So don't just think, I just need this one neural pathway. I'm going to just exercise some tact, because it's all those micro skills that you need in order to exercise tact in all those various different social connections. So that's why you need so many neurons, and you need all of these micro skills in order for you to be able to do this one principle of real leadership, because it is situationally dependent. So the benefits are enhanced impulse control. Everybody can use some more enhanced impulse control, to include myself, because now I have people on the live. So because I'm challenging myself, now there is a bigger group and a bigger reason to have impulse control. And what this does is it strengthens the brain ability to pause before reacting, leading to more thoughtful responses. So you are using your prefrontal cortex instead of a hijacked amygdala. And it increases the activation and the connectivity of the prefrontal cortex and the ACC. So you are strengthening that relationship every time you pause and respond instead of react. Next, you're going to improve your emotional regulation. Every adult needs to regulate this doggone limbic system right here in the temporal lobe for just a better day. And it reduces emotional outbursts, defensiveness, and you maintain calm under social pressure. And what it does is it balances this relationship between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. And so the communication allows you to have a lower overactivation in the amygdala. Next is a heightened perspective taking. So it expands the ability to understand other viewpoints and emotional states before speaking, because you're just going to take the time and look and see what's happening. And I've said this before, when people are moving and they have organizations or a lot of, because sometimes people take one day off and they got all kind of independent contractors at the business or the home. And so all this is going on. And so I recognize that. So when I'm going to speak to them and ask them questions, I'm using Tact. I'm being the thermostat in the situation to say, okay, here, where do you want this? We have a question about this. So that's Tact 2 and communicate effectively. Instead of saying, why you got all these people here? We trying to do our job. We can't get nothing done because all these people keep walking all over us. That's not going to work. And so, yes, it expands your ability. And what that also does is this junction right here again is being strengthened, the temporal parietal junction and the insular pathways. Now you're also going to have better social decision making. So it increases your accuracy in choosing the right words and tone for each context. And as I mentioned, every situation is different. So it's situationally based how you are going to respond tactfully in that situation. And where this is taking place is in the orbital frontal cortex and its integration with the superior temporal sulcus for reading social cues. So you're looking and you're observing, you're listening, you're using your whole brain to check to see what's taking place. So you can say, okay, this person's doing all this. So sometimes I might rub somebody's shoulder and say it's going to be okay. I might speak slower, softer, and tell them about a story. I may crack a joke or something to regulate that situation so that we can be tactfully getting accomplished what we need to accomplish. Next is increased contextual memory for communication. And this allows leaders to recall past interactions and adjust current responses for better outcomes. So I can always go, okay, got it, Lola, thank you. I can always go back to a previous situation that's similar to this because of how many times I've had to interact with people and go, okay, let me make an adjustment from what was successful back then to make this current interaction successful. And what this does is this strengthens hippocampus functions and retrieval efficiency. And so that is what takes place, is that because I've done so much with so many thousands of people, the hippocampus just says, oh, I know what this is similar to. Go ahead and use that tactical response. Next is greater trust building and capacity. So when you are consistently using Tact, it fosters credibility and long-term relationship stability. When someone knows that I can have this conversation with you and I'm going to be treated with dignity and respect, even if it's a hard conversation to have, that strengthens the relationship. And this is coordinated between the orbital frontal cortex, the prefrontal cortex, and the anterior cingulate cortex, and it's creating those social bonding circuits. And then finally, it's neuroplasticity and social regulation circuits. So repeated tactful interactions reinforce neural pathways for respectful and strategic communication. So it is about treating people with dignity and respect as you are communicating with them. And the long-term synaptic strengthening is in the prefrontal cortex, the orbital frontal cortex, and the temporal parietal junction networks. So Dr. Donna's core perspective is this. When a real leader chooses Tact, they are not only shaping the moment, they are rewiring the brain to default to respect, strategy, and influence every conversation. So what questions do you have about Dr. Donna Thomas-Rodgers' perspective on the real leader principle exercise Tact, or any of the neuroscience-based information that's connected to exercising Tact? And Noah said, no questions. Does anyone else have a question? If it's clear, I'll do the brain bit on Tact, and then we will answer our questions. Okay? Kevin said no. Jessica's getting the kids ready. Sean, if you have any questions, Lola's working too. Okay, got it. So here's the brain bit. Excuse me. Okay, exercise Tact. What is it? So here's how it's an activity that you can use in order to exercise tact, a quicker activity than the ones that I mentioned before that would take more time or be done throughout the day. So you're going to choosing words and timing that achieve the goal without triggering a threat response. This is the objective. And the brain circuits that are in play are the prefrontal cortex for planning, impulse control, the ACC for conflict monitoring, the ventral medial prefrontal cortex for emotional balance, the anterior insula, you're going to have awareness, the amygdala for threat detection, it's going to be downgraded for that tact, the temporal parietal junction for perspective taking, and the hippocampus for context and memory. And so why does this matter? The thinking brain is going to be online, it's going to preserve trust, reduce defensiveness, and it's going to improve problem solving under pressure. So that's the whole objective of these exercises. So you can use the Tact micro protocol, and it's under 30 seconds. And it's actually an acronym for the word tact. So you're going to target the outcome. What result do I want? You're going to assess states, my tone and their load, what's happening for the other person. You're going to choose your words. They're going to be specific, neutral, and behavior based. And then you're going to tune your delivery. So a slower pace, a lower volume, and open posture. And I'm going to go through all of this and then I'm going to give you an example. You have the 10-second script. I value, it's going to be a shared goal, when for a specific behavior, it, the impact, and let's. So how do we go forward? I'm going to be using the example with Nola from this morning. And then micro drills are 60 to 90 seconds. So you can also do 4 slow breaths, inhale 4 times, exhale for 6. And then that's going to calm the amygdala. Name your feeling in 3 words, label and reduce the activity of the amygdala, and ask one clarifying question before giving feedback. Now, what happens is when you're doing any of these exercises, here are some common pitfalls to avoid. Sarcasm, absolute tones, I always, I never, or multitasking while talking, which leads to judgment instead of observation behaviors. And daily repeat. So you can do this. So you can pick a conversation, you could write the sentence for your tact plan, you could deliver it, and you can note the outcome. So basically what happens is this. I'm doing my nasal rinse, 2 ants are crawling, Nola's yelling a question, and I gotta hurry up so I can get on live and take my cup back downstairs. And so how I can do this from a tact perspective is the tact, under 30 seconds. And so target the outcome. What result did I want? I just want to get rid of the few ants that are coming in the house. I just want to do my nasal rinse, and I just want to do my live. Next is assess the states. So what tone am I going to use because of the tone that I'm hearing from my child? Next, choose your words. Make them specific, natural, and behavior-based. I can't say, why the fuck you asking me this question and yelling at me this morning when I got all this stuff to do? You know these answers over here and all, and I'm already thinking about when I got bit from before. None of that. Neutral tone. Here's what was taking place. I'm using my nasal rinse. I'm going to chat to see what's happening. And yes, I know I left the light on in the kitchen. All things that are referencing me. And then the delivery. I slowed the pace. I lowered my volume. And I'm having open posture. So I ain't standing there like, nah, I told your ass. Open posture. Okay? And then what's happening is this 10-second script is, I value that you were concerned about the light being on. But here is the impact of what you said to me and how you said it to me. It's aggressive. So that's causing me to potentially have my amygdala hijacked when I'm in the process of regulating my amygdala because the ants are in my bathroom and I've already been bitten by ants. I'm the one who has to go on live in less than 15 minutes and deliver a message. So what we can do is you're going to start working on the listening challenge now. You're going to start letting those neurons fire and wire because you still have 8 days before you actually start it. So what I did was I used tact in that situation, emotional regulation, used the right tones, didn't yell at her, curse at her, blame her, or anything else. And so we had a better outcome. And that is how that situation works. So that's a whole walkthrough of how it happens. So again, no sarcasm, no blaming, no gesturing, none of that, because that's going to put gasoline on a fire that's already brewing. Okay? So what questions do you have about the exercising tact exercise, the quick one that you can use. Kevin said, no question. Oh, allergies are all these doggone notifications coming up on my phone. Busy phone day. Okay. All right. So 2 questions that I have for you today, and I'll have 3. What did you learn today? What did you learn about yourself? And what is your biggest takeaway regarding tact? So, what did you learn today? What did you learn about yourself? And what is your biggest takeaway regarding tact? And I took a lot. I'm extremely thirsty. Yes, tact is a muscle. And I can move out of the way so y'all can see that. Tact is a muscle. Real leaders strengthen it by practicing it until it becomes a daily habit. Dr. Donna. And if you go back to the front of the live, when it's up, you can screenshot that graphic and it has all the information that I covered today. Let me go back and read what Lola said. Lola said, I learned the difference in responding and reacting. And she's listening now. Nola said, I learned about myself. I need to start exercising tact. Yes, ma'am. And hopefully it's clearer now that I've explained it. Nola, I learned I need to write down a review of when I did and didn't use tact. I also need to regulate my emotions in the moment to be able to have tact in the moment. That is correct. That's what that 3 to 5 second pause is for. To calm your emotional centers down. That's why you wait. That's what the whole let me gather my thoughts sentence is for. That's what I've told Nola to do. And you all can do it as well. If someone is pressuring you or you're getting ready to pop off, you can stop and say to yourself or out loud, let me gather my thoughts. Let me gather my thoughts. And that's notification that in order for you to gather your thoughts, you have to be in the prefrontal cortex. You cannot gather your thoughts in the limbic system because those are just memories. And it's going to be this unreal. It's not going to be factually based if you use the limbic system to gather your thoughts. You're going to be gathering a plan to potentially pop off. Not even really a plan because the right amygdala is just going to act the damn fool. Today, pausing before reacting is a self-conditioning exercise. Yes, it is regulating the emotions. And I think that's the biggest takeaway that I have learned in these last 10 months that I have been studying the brain, is that it is your responsibility to regulate your limbic system, your emotional center. That's on you. And unaccountable people make it everybody else's responsibility to deal with their emotions. It's craziest shit I've heard. And when you think about it, you're mad, you're angry, you're distressed, you're in fear, and all of that. And somehow that's now everybody else's responsibility to deal with. Sean said, I have learned that tact is a way for calming the amygdala. I know now to reevaluate my approach for better outcome and to breathe. Yep, 3 to 5 seconds. That's why we breathe. We start lives with breathing. Amygdala is actually Amygdala. I know. So it's like amygdala. Amygdala. It is not spelled how it is pronounced at all. and Regina calls her amygdala Amy. And so I took it a step further, and I have named both the left and the right amygdala. And so, yes, thanks to Regina, Amy is the right amygdala, but Lala is the left amygdala. And the reason why I picked that is because you're in La La Land. The left amygdala will have you ruminating, daydreaming, and everything else, and not focused on what you need to focus on. One of the things additionally, and then your final question is, you're saying what is the biggest takeaway regarding tact, if you haven't done that already. And so what I'm working on is I'm literally working on, I'm having conversations with my left amygdala. But what I realize is that when you talk out loud to the left amygdala still keeps ruminating. So you actually have to use your inside voice to address what's happening with the left amygdala. You actually to train it. Now you can say that's not factually based and keep going, but the rumination, you literally have to give it new information to ruminate on, or it will just keep ruminating. Right now I can say that shit ain't true, and then bless you, be well. That shit is not true. And the left amygdala will keep ruminating. So if you find yourself ruminating on negative thoughts, thank you, left amygdala, go ahead and send it what you actually wanted to say. Because I even asked Lala, I said, why you ain't never got nothing positive to say to me about me? Why you always just sending some shit that ain't got nothing to do with me? And it's because of external anxiety. You take that right in, you pack it in the left amygdala, and it just keeps regurgitating. And I say, all this stuff I say I'm the baddest motherfucker walking the face of planet Earth, and all these other things. I read this stuff, I do all this work, and all you keep doing is regurgitating things that have nothing to do with me. Why? Why? She didn't really have an answer. So I am now working to program her. I'm my own test subject, programming her to ensure that she is only doing her job, which is to notify me of actual real threats and to let me know how I'm feeling so that I can process those feelings with words. That's actually her job. But she's doing everything else but her own damn job. Okay, I'm saying she because I'm a she. So your left amygdala could be a he, it could be a them, a they, doesn't matter. They're just not doing their job. Noah said, I forgot about it, so my biggest takeaway is to have it. Yes, that is correct. So before we get out of here, does anyone else have anything that they'd like to add or contribute? Tact is very important. Again, I would just like to reiterate the thousands of neuropathic connections that you have in order to have tact in each individual situation. Sometimes you could be dealing with a child, a teenager, a coworker, a supervisor, an elderly person, an irate person, a person suffering from a mental breakdown. So you can't just say, well, I got tact, and this is how I use tact all the time. This is the only way I use my tact. It literally is situationally dependent. And so you have to be, and every time you deal with a new tactful situation, it stores itself in the hippocampus. And now if a similar situation shows up, you can go back to, yeah, I remember when Mark called me a black bitch. Okay, is this that? No, but how did I handle that situation? Okay, cool. Got it. I remember when somebody popped off at work and Bo put his finger in my face on the second level of the belt and nothing happened to him. So I have these instances where I can literally respond versus react to defuse the situation if need be. So the more you find yourself in situations where you need to exercise tact, you're going to get some new neurons and you'll be prepared for the next iteration of having to use tact. Okay? I don't see anything else from anybody else. All right. So tomorrow I'm vacillating between back and forth, and I think the next is apologize when you are wrong is the next real leader principle. But then I discover something in my research for exercising tact, so I'm going to see which one of those I'm going to use tomorrow. But God willing, higher power in the universe, I will be back here tomorrow to deliver more neuropathic strengthening information for you so that this prefrontal cortex can be as strong as it possibly can, because that's how you use neuroprobability, which is the theory of personal accountability, as well as the 74 principles of real leadership. And that's how you regulate this, because this is the problem child. Also, I am definitely, we are now probably 75% done with the new website, have almost all the pages over. Now we're just having to put the book review pages on there. So by Monday, we will have the new website, Monday, Tuesday timeframe, up and running now, because you then have to point all of I have like 5 domain names that point towards my website. So I need to do that as well. It's definitely going to be simpler. Did some rebranding, 12 years on WordPress. It's time to switch. GoDaddy wasn't mobile friendly 12 years ago. Now they are. And I need to be able to make adjustments to the website from my phone. So behind the scenes, we are working on that very much. Yes, Sean, you said, may I add quickly, the short video on the word realize hit home for me. Okay, so what I can add to you, Sean, is that that short format video that you're watching is actually part of the PA challenges. So the PA 30-day challenge, you start with different ones, but it's personal accountability. So that format in and of itself, and you watch the Real Leader Brain. So the Real Leader Brains are for people who are doing Real Leader Resource Challenges. But what I do now is the Real Leader Brain and the PA have the same title. So you can listen to the audio one, which isn't a short, but it's still the same thing. So what happens is, how this is working now is that people need to become subscribers first on Instagram. And the reason for that is because you have to become accustomed to daily personal accountability. So by being on Instagram, interacting behind the wall so people can't see what you're doing, so because it is personal, well, people in the group can, just like here. And then you go to a 30-day challenge, which is the PA challenge. And the reason why you're doing that is because you don't have this neuropathic connectivity. You need to get accustomed warming up to do it. Then you do it, and then you graduate to the Real Leader Brain. And so what happens is, I'm doing these videos, the Real Leader Brain, to give you the strength to be able to regulate your whole emotional centers and learn how to use your brain. So that video does get published on YouTube because it has to be in a playlist for you to use later. But that's the whole process. So you start on Instagram, you do a 30-day challenge. Jessica just started her 30-day PA challenge. Everybody else is in Real Leader Resources. Kevin will be in Real Leader Resources starting in September, because it's an evolutionary process. So you have to prep your brain to be able to do all these things. But I do understand what you're saying with the realize. But that's the process. And no questions, it is relatively easy to do in the moment. Yes, Regina, thank you for that. So that is the process. I've been trying to get this process down to the point where everybody can be successful in achieving it. Starting out at 365 days was too much. And so now we are incrementally in the process of making that thing go as quickly and as efficiently as possible, so that you are, now that I know it's neurological, you got to start having those neurons fire and wire first in order for you to even start thinking and behaving in a personally accountable way. So that is the updates. Just finished. August 13th was the 12th year of me telling my sister, kick rocks, I got this, I would do this by myself. So now I am in year 12, and this is the beginning of year 12. So again, thank you for your time that you're investing. You are, every time you're on a live, every time you interact with any of the material, you are helping for me to improve it for you, as well as the people that will be coming behind you, because there are almost 6 billion adults in the world who don't know how to use their brain. And we need to all know how to use our brain so that we can function at a very high level. Regina said, I learned that the hippocampus responds to positive thoughts to help create new neurons and pathways. Yes, so it will, as you challenge yourself. So the key to that is challenging yourself is how you get those new neurons. So if you've ever been sitting in a situation and not know what to do, and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm gonna just go for it. And as you're going for it, you're getting what you need, is because you challenged yourself, and that gave the hippocampus notification that says, okay, you need new neurons. Let me give you some. So just go to the bank of hippocampus. Anytime you feel like you can't do something because it's hard, the hippocampus has you. It will allow you to learn the skills, the information that you need, because you couldn't have told me a year ago I was going to be in a neuroscience class doing physics and doggone chemistry at this level and understanding the brain. I'd have been like, shit, nah, ain't going to happen. And Regina said, I learned that I am a tactful person and need to continue development. You are developing it. Yes, ma'am. I agree that you are a tactful person. That's not something that is new to you at all. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much again for taking time out of your day to learn more about how your brain functions. go off and do amazing things today. God willing, higher power in the universe, I will be back tomorrow. Same time, same place, safe space, different brain t-shirt. Have a brain-tastic day. Take care.